this episode of Ask Me Anything, Meet the Directors. I am Scott English, Executive Director of the American Philatelic Society. In this episode, I want to introduce you to the team that makes it all happen at the APS and hope you get to know them a little bit better and how they serve you, the member. For those watching the presentation live, your microphone and camera are disabled during the presentation. To engage fellow attendees, please make comments in the chat section. If you have a question, please use the Q&A box, and we'll get to those questions at the end of the presentation. If you're watching a recording of this presentation, please feel free to ask questions in the comment section or email us at info@stamps.org. This program is provided thanks to the APS and APL member support. If you're not already a member of the American Philatelic Society or would like more information about our services, please visit our website at stamps.org. I'll ask each director to share a little about themselves and the departments they run. We already have a long list of questions, and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible over the next hour. We are recording, so if you miss any part of this, you will be able to view it on the APS YouTube page. With that, I'd like to introduce Eric Spielvogel. He is the Director of Education.
Hello, nice to have you all out there. We are excited to have you all here. This is a great group. Make sure that you notice that we have two plaid wearing people today. It's part of the fun. We were told to have fun with this. I am the newest, well, not the newest amongst this group, but I'm happy to be taking over for Kathy Brackbill. For those of you who don't have a sense of what we do in education, we are serving the learning needs of both the membership, adult philatelists, and also are trying to put energy into the youth, encouraging and supporting them. We have live events like GAS and Summer Seminar, of course, which is coming right around the corner, and some of you may be part of that. Looking forward to meeting you in June. We have put a fair amount of energy into getting as many courses online as we can. This summer, we'll spend some time getting C3A back up to speed and trying to improve its functionality and its aesthetic, both things that can use some benefits from. And I'm looking forward to getting more young people involved through tours that we give here at the museum and also through our YSCA program and our YPLF programs. I'll leave it at that for now. I'll let someone else go next. Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. Next, I'd like to introduce Jeff Krant. He's our Chief Administrative Officer. Jeff?
Good evening. So I started at the APS about 3 years ago, February 2020, right before COVID hit. And so I spent about a month learning my job from Rick Banks, who was here for many years. And then as soon as he left, we closed down the shop. And so that was quite an introduction for me. So what I do is I'm in charge of accounting, HR, payroll, and I also do the tenant relations. We have the complex here. We have 8 tenants in the Match Factory complex. And so I manage, the tenant relations and the upkeep and maintenance of the buildings. And one of the questions that Scott wanted us to discuss possibly is, are we a collector? And I would consider myself a beginner collector. I, like many other people, was inherited my collection from my father when I was cleaning out our house and found out that he was had a whole bunch of stamps that I didn't even realize he was collecting. And so my intent is to continue what he was collecting, which was a lot of space and history. And I also like to collect the stamps from the shows that I go to, first day covers, first day issues, and just cachets from shows I go to. One of the initiatives that I'm really focusing on is just working on renting out the space that we have in the complex that's vacant right now. We're working with a realtor to try to get those spaces filled and looking at other opportunities to rent out the space We have a distillery in the complex that is looking to possibly rent out some of the space for events that they're having. So, thank you.
All right. Next, Wendy Mazzorti, who is the Director of Membership and Shows.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm Wendy Mazzorti. I've been with the APS for over 30 years now. I started as the assistant to the Director of Membership, and now I am the Director of Membership and Shows. I do collect a little bit, just some fun things, some fun topicals, Bugs Bunny and Snoopy collections I have, as well as some James Dean. A little bit about the department. For the membership team, we are basically your main point of contact with the APS. So I would say we're kind of your tech support. Nora DeGeorge and Sarah Myers can certainly help you take care of anything from address changes to paying your dues. They can help with your web accounts, connect you with the local clubs and societies, as well as the dealers. And of course, they can get you over to the departments to really get into some additional support. In addition to serving members, we do the recruiting of new members, of course. We do this through email campaigns and social media, and we do outreach to the societies and the dealers and the clubs to help out. We also invite our members to join in on a Membership Matters campaign that we have started to get members to help us introduce new members to the hobby. That is on our website. It's stamps.org/membership matters if you want to check it out and ways that you can help and earn recruiting credits and potentially earn free dues. On the show side of things, of course, our team is gearing up for the Great American Stamp Show that's going to be held on August 10th through the 13th. That'll be held in Cleveland. I'm sure many of you heard about the show that's coming out. There's a lot of information that's been out there and posted in the e-blasts and everything. But the show is going to be hosted. It's sponsored by the United States Postal Service. Sorry about that. Sponsored by the USPS. It's co-hosted by the American Philatelic, the American Topical Association, and the American First Aid Cover Society. It's being held at the Huntington Convention Center in Cleveland, and the show will feature live auctions Friday, Saturday, and Sunday with Kuriga auctions. We will have over 90 dealers on the floor that you can shop with. 39 societies will be hosting booths there. In addition to the United States Postal Service having a large presence on the floor, we will also have 2 additional postal administrations, Postal Faroe Islands and United Nations will be joining us. Of course, there will be hundreds of exhibits, as well as the World Series of Philately competition. We will also be hosting a special display from the Royal Philatelic Society of London. That's a very special piece. We'll also have some rarities as usual. There are many seminars and events that have been planned, as well as 8 first day ceremonies that's going to take place on Thursday and Friday. So there's going to be lots to do. The schedule has been posted out on the GAS website, so you definitely want to check that out so you can start marking your calendar for things you want to see at the show. Saturday, we have the Cachet Makers Bourse for those first day collectors. Of course, we'll have the youth area with the stamps by the bucket, covers by the containers, which are some popular things folks like to come and have fun with. So I just recommend everyone visit the website, stamps.org/gas. There's a lot of information out there on all these things. I'm sure I missed telling you some stuff, but you'll definitely want to pre-register so that you don't have to stand in line at the show. And I hope to see everyone in Cleveland.
Well, I know I'm excited. Next, we have Susanna Mills, who's our editor-in-chief. Susanna?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm excited to talk about what I think is the most exciting job at the American Philatelic Society, not to be totally biased. Our department puts together the monthly American Philatelist. We also put together the quarterly Philatelic Literature Review, which is the journal of the APRL. We also do some book publishing. We have a tight-knit team of 3. That's myself, that's Jeff Stage, our senior editor, who is based in Syracuse, and that's Chad Cowder, who is our graphic designer. all members receive the American Philatelist. Every issue is written almost entirely by members or by the people in this call right now, the directors. They also write their columns, but everything else comes directly from the members, from experts who are just like you, who have some kind of passion in their collecting that they want to share with the world. So we have open submissions to any members who want to contribute an article. That's true for the AP and the PLR, and we look forward to seeing what you are interested in contributing.
Thank you, Susanna. Next up is Scott Tiffany, who's our Director of Information Services and librarian.
Thank you, Scott. Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you on board with us tonight, and we'll be here to answer any of your questions. As Scott said, I'm the librarian and Director of Information Services here at the American Philatelic Research Library. I've been with the APS for a little over 10 years now. I started as a volunteer in the library, doing things as needed. I moved up to being the library or the reference assistant for about 7 years. And then in my current position for the last 3 years. We have a staff of 4 people, including myself. Myself as the director. We have Marion Mills as our technical services manager, who does a lot of cataloging and getting things into the collection. We have Marcia Garman, who's our reference assistant, who answers a lot of the more tricky or difficult or more detailed reference requests that come into the library. And Alicia Leathers, who's our library assistant, who helps us with reference requests as well as a lot of administrative duties. All 3 of them do cataloging and sort of putting things into the collection. In terms of my collecting interests, I do have a few. I would sort of probably put myself somewhere between a beginner and an intermediate. And that all started since working here. I had an older brother, or I have an older brother, who did some collecting, which was kind of bizarre. I didn't find out till actually I took this position that he actually had a stamp collection, and we lived in the same house, but that's a long story. But so I would class myself as sort of an intermediate, sort of a beginner collector. I collect early Canada, some of the PEI, Nova Scotia, and British Columbia issues, the earliest ones. I've always had a fascination with the US special delivery issues as well. I have some topical collecting. I also sort of sat in one time on a British Machen's on the road course that was before a stamp show one time, and got fascinated by those, but haven't sort of delved into that much, little over my head, some of it. But some of the sort of topical collections that I have are hockey on stamps and early cinema, silent film stars. I'm kind of a silent film buff away from the APS. And sort of a collected things like Chaplin and Buster Keaton and Harold Lloyd and some others on stamps. In terms of things we're working on in the library, as many of you know, we've been really busy with the digital library, trying to grow that. We've been we've more than doubled it in size in little over a year, which is exciting. We're about to move into phase 2 of that project, in which we're going to sort of hire somebody as a digital librarian so that we can really move that forward even more. And I'm sure we'll have some questions that we can answer about the digital library in the future tonight as well. One of the other things that I'm working on is, it's sort of related to the digital library, is we get a lot of material anymore in digital form. So a lot of our smaller clubs and societies and organizations don't necessarily, I'm sure some of you know who are part of these clubs and organizations, don't print things anymore because of the cost of printing and sending that out and things like that. And so we receive a lot of things like that in digital form only. And so we have those on internal servers. We can't share those with people remotely because we don't have permissions to do that. But what we're looking into with myself and the staff here, we're looking into the possibility of having those available when you come visit us in the library. So you'd go to a computer and you could search across many different sort of journals and many different sort of types of material while you're here. So that's something we're sort of exploring just on the initial stages of. I look forward to any of your questions tonight. Gladly sort of take any questions about the digital library, what we do in the library, and we look forward to assisting you in your future endeavors. If you have big or small, we handle all sorts of different types of research requests. So looking forward to this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Coming up next is the star of 2 back-to-back AMAs. That is Carol Hoffman, who is our Director of APS Sales. Carol?
Hi, everyone. As Scott said, I'm the Director of the APS Sales Unit, and that includes circuit sales and stamp store. I've been with APS for 44 years, starting as a retirement clerk in circuit sales to my current position, which I started at the end of 2020. And I do collect pigs on stamps. At first, when I started, I had no interest, but then I decided to start collecting. And so I picked topical pigs, which there are a lot. I was actually surprised after working with the circuit books. You get to see a lot of different things on stamps. I have a staff of 5 who work very hard to provide the best service we can for our members. Bill Dixon, he is the circuit manager. So any circuit questions, Bill would be able to answer them. Then I have Stephanie Frankhauser, who she works in circuit sales and internet sales. She processes the circuits whenever they come back to APS. And then I have Barb Johnson, who is a longtime employee of APS. She is our primary scanner and helps pull orders. Barb is kind of a jack of all trades. She can do about anything over in sales division that we ask. And then I have Tammy Emmel and Mary Walliser. They both work in the mailroom part-time. And then the rest of the time they're over in stamp store or helping with circuit sales stuff. Right now in circuit sales, Bill and I are working together to try to combine some of the circuits that are in short supply. We're going to try to combine them into different categories to provide better quality circuits for everybody. And stamp store, along with Wendy, we're trying to work on a shipping solution and postage costs for buyers on HIP stamp, along with better search functionalities. So I thank everybody for coming tonight.
Okay, next, Ken Martin, who's our Director of Expertising.
Hi, everybody. I started collecting stamps in 1975, joined the APS in 1980, began as a volunteer at the APS in 1982, became a full-time employee in 1995. As Scott said, I'm currently Director of Expertising. One other employee, Sharon Shawley, in the department. I've also I collect a number of different things. I have an exhibit related to blood donation, blood transfusion, a couple other topicals. I have some interest in modern postal history and especially the evolution of automation of the mails, such as barcodes and various markings that you would see. We'll certainly try to answer any questions you have tonight.
Hey, Scott.
Yes.
Before we can I do a quick shout out to my 2 staff members? I did real quick. Lisa Clemson works in the accounting, and she handles all the cash payments, credit cards, and PayPal transactions, and answers a lot of questions for staff. And Fred Fox works on the maintenance. He does all the maintenance and tenant relations for us in the complex. Thanks.
Okay. Sure. Thank you very much for that, Jeff. And Lisa, I know, is watching. So, hey, Lisa, it's good to see you again. Anyway, on to the first question. So I wanted to start off tonight with what I thought would be a fairly easy question. And of course, I'm going to throw this one out to all of the directors. So we get this question a lot, but this is one example of it that was submitted in advance of this evening. Is philately becoming a hobby of the past with current trends of mailing everything without any stamps at all? So typically the question, is the hobby dying? Is it going to go away? That sort of thing.
I don't think so. We get this question a lot in the library as well. Sort of when you go to a show or something like that too. I don't think it's necessarily dying. It's evolving. So I think that if many of you sort of are familiar with, you know, where we were before COVID and after COVID, things like this weren't possible or we weren't doing before COVID. I don't think I think the sort of standard sort of going to a church basement or something like that and being a member of a club and sort of doing that is necessarily the same. Collecting is collecting. I mean, people are going to collect things in this hobby just like they would in any other hobby. Are those things still being, does it necessarily revolve around those things still being produced like the question sort of mentions? I still think you're going to collect things that are interesting to you. I still think there are plenty of things in the hobby to collect. I just think the hobby's sort of changing. There's a lot more that's digital. There's a lot more that's done this way. And people can still get together and sort of enjoy this hobby and collect in this hobby. So I think it's just sort of changing. And it's changing as we speak.
I tend to agree with you, Scott. You know, from a membership standpoint, I get a little concerned sometimes because it gets trickier to find recruiting, you know, to try to keep, and I'm sure a lot of the clubs are dealing with that. It's hard to sometimes figure out where we're going to go for, you know, to recruit new members next. So sometimes looking at that, I get concerned, but then, you know, from a show standpoint, I see everything, all this activity that is around the current show that I'm planning, and it's been amazing. I mean, we filled 2 hotels, we have filled the show floor completely, we're completely out of booths. So, I mean, there is definitely an interest in this hobby. I mean, I can see it from that. So I agree. I don't think it's a dying. It's evolving.
I would also add just briefly, sort of where we're experiencing this now. I talked earlier about the digital library and how that's how people access information about this hobby now. That's some of the things that we're sort of developing in the library and in other departments as well. So I just think it's a changing thing, and people are sort of coming to the hobby differently.
Yeah, Ken, I just want to add real quick, you know, I think we lose sight of the fact that we still have 25,000 members in the APS. And then you've got other stamp collectors who are not members, who local, you know, for other organizations, the ATA, the AFDSC, and local clubs. And so you've got all these members out there who like, and then you collect the stamps, and then you may have some who just collect the stamps who don't belong to any membership. So we're probably undercounting how many people who are out there who actually collect the stamps. But I mean, we've got 25,000 that are members that we know of. And so I think it's hard to say it's dying when you've got that many members, and the supply is out there. I mean, stamps aren't disappearing. You know, you still have a significant amount of stamps in the population, if you will. So I think they're always going to be out there. As long as they're out there, then people will continue to collect them, the ones that they like.
There've been claims the hobby's been dying for the past 100 years. Many people would look at the 1930s as the golden age of the hobby. You had a president of the US who was a stamp collector. You know, you had radio shows and so forth. The APS has at least 5 times as many members now as it did then. There were very few what was then called units or affiliates, specialty societies at that point in time. Most people at that point in time collected the entire world. You could do it in a couple volumes, as opposed to what, you know, 750,000 stamps today. But if you try to collect the whole world, now we have around 180 specialty societies and affiliates. So it's changed. It'll continue changing, but I don't think it's dying.
Yeah, just to reiterate what my colleague said, there is a lot of energy out there. I'd say there's especially a lot of energy online, and that looks different than what we're used to. And maybe those people online aren't necessarily doing what we'd call traditional philately, traditional collecting. So it's changing, and we have to continue to evolve and adapt with it. But the energy's there for sure.
I want to pop in here too. Susanna's suggesting a thing about exposure in the education world. And all of the meetings we have, we talk about the hobby versus the tradition of the hobby and the people and the circulation of materials. And so many of the people know the history of this and were exposed to it because it was part of culture in a different way. I deal with a lot of kids who come in the building, and it's almost the opposite of that. The fact that they have never seen this stuff and it is not circulated in their lives, they haven't touched it. They never saw a box of these things. They don't know how to make a postcard is part of the mystique to it. And I think that's something we can tap into a lot. And what I've learned about in my few months here is that the storytelling that comes from the membership and how people get connected to it stamp by stamp is part of what's cool about this. And I think leveraging that with newer people and with other audiences is what makes this exciting.
Okay, I think we could probably have a whole session on this alone, but I think that covers the bases. And I think the sentiment is pretty well there, that there's a lot of optimism. I mean, we deal with collectors every day. We're looking at the trends every day. And so I think that you all have given a great perspective on that. Next question is this, and this is moving into the education piece, Eric, since you closed it. I think I'd want to start with this one. Now, I want to be clear to the audience that I am reading the questions verbatim, so please accept my apologies if I say something that sounds rude or untoward. Why isn't the APS doing more to get new collectors started? What is available is pathetic and omits the opportunity to be creative. Eric?
I was taking bets on whether the word pathetic would come up in this, but the resources for new collectors are kind of infinite. My experience, I didn't do this in my introduction. I am also not a collector traditionally, but it's impossible to be in this building without becoming kind of enamored with the ways that people come to this hobby. I'm just learning how to become a collector and how to sift through the C3A as an example, as a platform. We have a website, we have a lot of information resources. The word pathetic is rough. We have so many resources, so many people and so many members, as Wendy has said, as Scott has said, that are so invested in telling the stories, sharing their experiences, showing why the materials are interesting, showing why the history is interesting. My job is to try to make those more accessible. And I know there are a couple other questions in the education queue about what has happened, why isn't that better? The technology behind it's tricky. We're going to spend probably a lot of the summer making that more accessible. My associate, Katie Monsell, who's only with us temporarily, has a library sciences degree, has really helped try to bring some of the indexing of that back. It's not easy to find stuff that's relative to what someone might be interested in. So there is a lot of room for growth. Yes. We start with a really huge framework of resources, and I'm kind of looking forward to making that more available. And we have summer seminar coming up in a couple of weeks. And with my media background, I'm looking forward to capturing some of that as well and starting a new chapter of resources for new people, because I'm one of those and I do care about that. So I appreciate that question. And I hope that sounds hopeful.
So Eric, a personal question, if I'm allowed to ask it. One of the members submitted a question and asked if you were related to Jackson Spielvogel, who was his favorite professor at Penn State University.
I made Scott wait for this answer from 9 o'clock this morning, so he's been chomping at the bit for this. Yeah, that is my dad. I'd love to know who asked that question. I have had the experience here a couple times of members asking me that, and it's a great connection. My early connection to stamps is watching my dad go through his German stamps. So he's alive and well. I'm hoping to have him here actually for some of summer seminar. If you tell me who you are, I'll pass that along to him. I love that question.
As luck would have it, I've got the contact information. I'll make sure we get that to you. So jumping around a little bit, I want to move over to estate planning. This is a question submitted by a member who inherited the collection that she has from her father and has managed it since 1999. The her issue now is that she's ready to pass it on to someone else. So her question is, well, what do I do with this? I guess she's got no one in her family that's interested in taking it on. So we get this question a lot, I know, through many of our departments. So what's good advice for people who are looking at disposing of their collection?
I mean, putting it really simple, you have a few choices, to give it to somebody, to donate to somebody, or to sell it. Hopefully a choice is not to throw it in the trash. We don't want that. I mean, many people, it seems, want it to be taken by somebody who's going to preserve it as a collection. Realistically, some people want to donate it to a museum or something and want them to preserve it as a collection. That's in most cases, that's pretty unrealistic. I mean, the vast majority of collections are going to be sold to a stamp dealer. If they're really valuable, maybe they could be sold at auction, or parts of them would be sold at auction. So in most cases, well, I mean, it's the same advice is not, there's not one universal advice that's right for every collection. The nature of the collection makes a huge difference. How specialized it is, what the average value of the stamps are. But in general, I would probably start with our dealer directory on the website at stamps.org/dealers, and probably use the filter by zip code and try to find some stamp dealers in your vicinity. You're probably going to have to provide some overview. Many stamp dealers hear from multiple people a day, and they have to make some decisions as to whether it's worth their time to pursue. They hear from many who had collections as a kid that maybe they didn't spend a penny on, or maybe they spent a couple dollars total, or their 10 cents a week allowance or whatever. And those probably aren't worth much more today than was paid back then. And it would be not a good use of their time as a dealer trying to, pay themselves, so to speak, trying to live on being a dealer, to go out and look at those collections. So you may need to provide a description. If you can do a one-page overview, which you could email them, maybe with a couple photos taken with a cell phone or something, giving you an idea of the scope of the collection and if there are key items, that would be a good start to try. I mean, if you did inherit the collection from a recent APS member, we basically say within the death in the past year, we do have an estate advisory service where we have about 200 APS members from around the country, and we could try to put you in touch with a member in your vicinity who would come to your home, most commonly your home, and try to give you some basic advice. We also have information on the website, as well as printed brochures, certainly, to help.
Okay, so again, I want to move around a little bit to make sure that everyone gets a chance to answer some questions, because I know that there's just a lot of different categories here. Carol, moving into Stamp Store, the question that we got is, are there any plans to fix the lack of search results on HipStamp? I currently get 0 results no matter what keyword I use. HipStamp only uses the title for searches, and all you have in the titles is a category number and condition. So almost any keyword used has 0 results. And then keywords is repeated.
Okay, yes, we are working with HipStamp to find the best solution for that. You can, up in the top search bar to the left of HipStamp, just type in, we have some keywords that you can search by. Most of them are topical keywords. And because we're finding out that if you put too many characters in the title, then it will truncate after so many, and it's not going to really do any good. So we're working with some of the people at HipStamp to try to get search functionality better for everybody. And I mean, I have found that, like, using the top search bar without picking a category, sometimes I can search a little bit better. But if you go to the left-hand side and pick if you pick a category, like a country, and you can search through there, because then you get different categories within that country, like US, you would get back of the book, duck stamps, things like that, where you can find them that way. And I know one of the questions was about test stamps, which under, if you pick the category and then US, go to back of the book, you will see we do have 21 test stamps. If you scroll down, at stamp type, you will see that there is a category for test stamps because somebody brought that question up.
Yeah, just to add on that a little bit, I mean, HIP stamp obviously doesn't have, it wasn't the same search capabilities that the old site had. The old site had just all kinds of different bangs and whistles to it, but HIP does a totally different search functionality where they really want you to hone in on first select your country and then start paring it down. You know, do you want to look at the condition? Do you want a stamp type? And so it really takes just a little bit more thought when you go to do a search, what you're looking for. Try to select your country first and then try to pare it down using the like Carol said, the left-hand bar down underneath. You'll start to see a little pieces that you can keep adding in to try to pare down what you're looking for. But topicals, that's a little bit trickier right now. The way that we trained all of our sellers for the past how many years to enter, they never had to enter all the topical stuff in separate fields. So we are working with HIP, as Carol said, and we really hope to get the topicals paired out here soon. So we are working towards that for sure.
Not to zero in on Stamp Store, and I'm going to break my own rule by answering this question for everyone here. But the question keeps coming up about the 1099K requirement that was included in the CARES Act. For those of you who don't know, if you're an online seller, in 2021, Congress inserted a provision that said that lowered the threshold down to $600 annually. So if you sell that much online, you're required to receive a 1099K, which is bureaucrats love numbering forms, and the IRS is no stranger to that. But the 1099K basically accounts for that. The idea was to capture income that was being done by online sales. I think almost immediately after it was enacted by Congress and signed by the president, everyone realized what an incredibly bad idea it was. So much so that the IRS announced in December that they would forego requiring issuance of 1099Ks for the 2022 tax year. So now we're in 2023, and the expectation is that Congress is going to change the law. Just this week, we had a bipartisan group from in the Senate introduced legislation to raise that threshold from 600 up to 10,000. The prevailing wisdom is that Congress will, believe it or not, work this out and come up with a bipartisan solution that can be signed. My expectation is that it will happen sometime over the next 4 to 5 months. If not, there will be increasing pressure on the IRS to suspend the rule again for 2023, because at the $600 level, you are talking about an amazing amount of additional paperwork required for businesses, for nonprofits, for any number of folks. And the tax accountants just don't know how to manage that barrage of paperwork. You're talking about a very substantial amount. So for those of you who are selling online, we are monitoring the situation. My misfortune was that I worked in the legislative process on Capitol Hill for 11 years, so I know it well, and I stay connected to it even though I'm here. So we are watching the situation. I am incredibly concerned about it, but I'm also confident that there's going to be a resolution to it. So, but if it is required, we will issue those 1099Ks from the APS, but I just don't see that as being likely. So I hope that helps. Next question. We got a lot of questions about counterfeit stamps. One was, how can there be email sales of stamps 100 for $29.99? What is the APS doing to handle the unprecedented amount of counterfeited newly issued postage? This is something we hear about a lot, and I know that Ken, you really have been on the front line for this in terms of seeing counterfeit stamps coming through expertising?
We've seen some, not a lot, but I mean, realistically, I mean, there's postal inspectors and others, and they haven't been able to stop it. I'm not sure what we can do. Unfortunately, human nature is when you see a deal, what you think is a good deal, a lot of people will take advantage of it. But realistically, if you're paying 50% for quote current forever stamps, very little chance that they're actually genuine. I mean, and some of them are very good now. They have tagging, and some of the earlier ones would, be rejected by facer canceller machines, and all your mail would be returned, and it was easy to figure out. The newer ones, they're doing a lot better job at counterfeits. I don't know how the APS can possibly tackle this. I mean, we don't have the resources. There's a whole postal inspectors. We have seen in some cases, sellers on eBay of genuine stamps who have been stopped by eBay from selling them because they were selling them at slightly below face and they were afraid they weren't good. So there is some actions on some fronts, but I don't believe, other than advising members that, if the deal's too good to be true, it's probably too good to be, it's probably not legitimate stamps. I don't believe that the APS can possibly stop it. They need to be stopped. I think most are being printed outside the country, and they need to be stopped when they're coming into the country. We don't have people we can send out to raid warehouses or ship cargo holds or anything like that.
So I'll tackle this a little bit. In my hand are two sets of counterfeit stamps. There are a sizable number of them. As a matter of fact, there's one that is a wildlife series that was done in 2014. The other is a set of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer stamps from 2014 as well. And the APS member was smart enough to figure out that the stamps were counterfeit based on the price, and he looked at them and then he communicated back and asked for a refund, which he got. The email response back to him, which he sent in the donation, was in Chinese. So I think that's a good indicator. Look, this is a huge problem. Our job isn't that we can stop it. The USPS isn't stopping it. The customs, border and customs aren't stopping it. And those folks have deeper pockets and more resources and law enforcement power. We don't even have that. Our job, I think, from the APS perspective, and I'll put a challenge out to everybody here, and that is, you've really got to be able to educate the non-philatelic stamp buying public to make them aware of this. Start with identifying those ads that are online that are completely bogus. And make sure that people are aware of the fact that if you're buying forever stamps at some reduced cost, then they're completely bogus. If they're not buying from a trusted source, eBay is not the greatest place in the world to get your forever stamps. So you've got to be able to, this is an opportunity where you can provide practical knowledge to someone who's not a stamp collector. And I think those conversations can really help you get them more interested in the hobby. So take that opportunity as a teachable moment to be able to reach out to them and say, hey, this is having an impact on all of us. And so that's a good opportunity for us. We can be educators. The APS can be an educator, and we're working on that. But we would call on our members to join in that effort to do all that they can in order to make an impact on this as well.
Yeah, we can all be duped by that. I myself recently, and Ken was ready to choke me over this one. I bought on Amazon. My son's getting married soon, and there were some beautiful wedding stamps out there, and I ordered them. Like, they were half the cost. I don't know what I was thinking. We just had the conversation in a staff meeting, but when I got them, I brought them in. I said, Ken, these are real. Look at them. They all have all the USPS markings, and there's indicators on the back, and it's all real. And he's like, no, it's not. And of course, so I reached out to Amazon. Hey, by the way, I work for the American Philatelic Society, and they're telling me these are not real. There was no argument to, here's your refund. You don't even need to send stamps back. So yeah, we can all be taken by it. It was, wishful thinking that I was getting a good deal for the wedding, but Live and learn.
Whether you can donate those to the cause as well. Because I mean, look, our goal is always to make sure we take those counterfeit stamps out of circulation so that they're not being used and abused. So we take on those stamps and we're happy to do it.
I think the thing is, like, it's so easy in the online world to sort of do that. I say frequent your local post office and give them some business and buy them there.
That's a great point. I mean, it's never wrong
They
to
didn't
stop
have
by
any pretty
and buy
wedding
those.
stamps. They didn't have
Well-
any pretty wedding stamps.
Well,
when I
then
was
work
at
on your
the
post
party.
office. There's always love stamps supposedly available. It should
Yes.
always be second class wedding rate stamps. That's
Yeah.
one of those
No,
things
well, let me
that
tell you, not
theoretically
here at
every
the
post
AP.
office should have.
The APS post office should get more better wedding stamps. I'll have to work on Mary in the post office for that. Hey, I'm getting off track here. Sorry.
For those of you not familiar, this is kind of how our weekly staff meetings go. But that said, moving on to the next question. I think I want to focus on, I saw a comment by someone and there was a question on this as well. The member wrote, I learned on Facebook that NOJEX won't be happening this year. We don't have any large stamp shows in New Jersey or New York City. Is the APS helping to keep stamp shows going? Wendy, what are you working on?
I'm working on the stamp show. The APS does try to support the shows as much as we possibly can. I mean, we do know some of the shows are struggling, so they'll reach out to us if they need exhibitors. We've sent e-blast out to our exhibitors trying to help support that effort. We also send e-blasts out to folks in the area that the shows are going to be in, letting folks know attendees, to promote the attendees to come. There's also lots of information and resources that we have on our website. If you look under the events tab on our website, there's actually a page called the, show preparation. There is a lot of information there that can help out, but one of the biggest things to keep in mind, for a lot of these shows, for them to be successful, you need a really good, local leadership and local support for the show, as well as have a good base of dealers that are going to participate. So we can try as much as we can to support them, reach out to us and we'll see what we can do, but, look locally and see what kind of support you can get. And
I think it's also like get involved. So find out your local stamp club, and not just one club, several clubs. If you have clubs close by, sort of don't always try. I think some of the smaller shows try to do it with, one club doing all the organization and things like that. So if you can sort of get a number of clubs together or societies, invite societies to have their meetings there. But I think the biggest thing is involvement. If you're passionate about these shows, get involved, start talking with people who share your vision, and sort of, that's really what it comes down to. Wendy's right. You have to have somebody local who's willing to sort of commit that kind of time. And it's not just one person. You go to a lot of shows and it's usually one person doing a lot of the work. And you can't have that. It's got to be a shared responsibility. So I just say get involved and find people who in other clubs, in your club, that want to share the same sort of passion for it.
One of the things I want to say is I think there's some sort of misperception about NOJEX itself. For those of you who aren't familiar, it's in northern New Jersey, and it was jointly sponsored by the American Stamp Dealers Association and the NOJEX committee. That show's been around for decades, and the partnership between the ASDA and NOJEX is relatively new. That started in 2017, and look, it's an honest business decision. I can tell you that from the World Series of Philately perspective, 4 shows have surrendered their World Series of Philately status. We have one that's been suspended right now because the show committee itself is in disarray. We have another committee right now that's non-responsive and owes us a lot of information. Toot sweet. My expectation is that I'm going to have to go to the APS board to request a suspension of their WSB status because they're not even capable of responding to basic inquiries about show operations, dates, and whether or not they're able to appoint a jury, things like that. We have other shows that are on the bubble that we're monitoring, and for those shows, we are working with them. But I think one of the things that we have to be honest about, and I'm called a heretic every time, is, we've got to be honest about whether or not the World Series of Philately needs 25 shows. These are national level shows, folks, all around the country. And I don't think we have the infrastructure to support that the way that we used to, or the way that we needed to in the past. It's not an indicator of the health of the hobby that physical retail space isn't as popular as it used to be. That's a reality of the marketplace. One of the things that I shared with the staff this morning, as a matter of fact, is that Walmart has in the last year heavily invested in their website and their online app, because this is the king of all retail spaces, by the way, in the US today. Their strategy is to broaden and grow their online sales and basically give up physical space sales over the next decade. And if Walmart's doing it, then the hobby needs to be serious about whether or not they can sustain that same operation that we've had for the last 50 years. And I think the answer to that is no. I'm holding a town hall meeting at an Apex next week. I will talk about this in more detail, so I won't bore everyone here with that now. I apologize for taking that long with it. Eric, back to you. I've gotten a couple of summer seminar questions, and I'd like to be able to touch on them. Number one is, what's the current status of enrollment? How do things look for summer seminar coming up in June?
Thanks for that question. Summer seminar, I've seen a bunch of questions about summer seminar also. It is healthy and steady. We are going to have about 70 people in the building. We haven't done this for 5 years, so we're kind of putting the pieces back together. We have a nice portfolio of instructors and folks who have been with us for a long time. I know that everyone who I've talked to is really excited to be back in the building together and socialize. And I've had a lot of anxiety about the variety of content and a bunch of other things. But most people have told me that they're really excited just to be together again. On the other hand, there have been a lot of requests, and I've seen questions about why we're not doing it online again. And that is really, I know for a lot of people, an online version of a live thing is just, hitting a button and turning it on. The infrastructure to do what they did in the last couple of years as a full online summer seminar is pretty significant, and it's another whole event. And so we certainly anticipate that we're going to record as much as we can. It takes, cameras and media infrastructure, but doing it live and streaming the entire experience is a different thing. So we will have a lot of material available for people online after this is over. We're hoping to live stream a couple of the general sessions, which should be open to all the membership, and we've got some cool speakers there as well. And so retroactively, we'll have material available online this year, and we'll be looking next year at how we can make more of the physical experience live also, to include more people, because 70 is not the biggest number, but it'll be an exciting in the building experience for everyone.
And Eric, to that, I think the challenge that you've recognized over the last few months is with the courses that we teach in person, our instructors typically look at, providing a lot of physical material. There's a lot of tactile experiences that go on with that. And so those don't necessarily translate. So one of the things that's been discussed, and you can expand on this if you want to, is this idea of sort of segregating, that is, doing a virtual seminar series as well. And, I guess the question is that something that's on the decks to talk about, not necessarily just as summer seminar, but either as an ongoing project or a special month, if you will, where we do virtual seminars?
Like following up on the issue of the quality of that experience. You can turn a camera on and you can see what people are doing. So much of the philatelic experience is seeing things close up, seeing what's happening, in detail. And I know even just in working with some of our instructors, they're really concerned about the quality of the television in the room, so that the magnification of the stamps is, perfect. So Scott, from a film standpoint that scripting some of that out is a lot more valuable and it's a better quality instructional experience. And so one of the things that I'm looking forward to in this summer seminar is watching the live process and being in the room with a bunch of instructors who are really experts at presenting and have done this a lot of times and have been really popular instructors, and seeing how they manage the room and seeing how the interaction goes, and then trying to replicate as much of that as we can online later, because the interaction is another whole piece of the puzzle, and making that decent quality is hard to do, and to make people feel like they're in the room. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And I know that's a big part of what we do next with summer seminar in our online programs. Hope that's what you're hoping to hear.
Well, I mean, obviously we'll get to the point where we start executing a plan, but our goal, I can say this, our goal is that we want to bring as much of these experiences online that we can. And I think, we're succeeding with doing things like with events like this and our stamp chat series that's back and operating again. So, I think that and the directors, to their credit, are really embracing this idea of creating as much access to themselves as humanly possible. So I really do appreciate what they're doing on that front.
Can I add one more thing, since you just mentioned this? One of the, there's so much content out there, and in the online world, you can share content very easily. And so when we talk about online classes, also the interaction really is crucial. And so you design interaction, that's another whole part of the experience. And so one of the things we've learned in doing these Ask Me Anythings is that the interaction is sometimes the content, and then follow-up questions and the ways to interact later really comes into play. So I'm glad we've been doing these also, because it's giving us a chance to test a lot of that out.
Wendy, I got a question in from one of our board members, and so I'm going to ask it because, of course, he's on the board. I'm just kidding. But before I do that, I do want to thank Greg Galletti, who is our newly elected vice president to the American Philatelic Society board, as well as Van Siegling, who is a director at large, for participating. Was not a required event for APS or APRL board members. They volunteered to do this on their own, so I really do appreciate them being here and being a part of the community. So, Wendy, the question is an update on volunteer needs and what the outreach has been for organizing Great American Stamp Show in Cleveland.
The volunteer needs. Well, we have had some really great support from the Black River Stamp Club, and I'm drawing a blank on the other one. Mr. Capone and Dennis Sadowski, they have been fantastic orchestrating with a lot of the local clubs out that direction. They have actually been visiting meetings. They have been rallying for volunteer support. So we have seen a lot of volunteers come in. Sarah keeps the schedule on that currently, and we do have a lot signed up. I mean, we still have some openings for things like we need a little bit of help with the youth area, the registration area, and even the ATA and the AFDCS, they, of course, are very much involved with the show, and they are bringing a lot of volunteers in with them. So this has been a good, Cleveland is going to be a good show in regards to volunteers and everything. There's a lot of people there to support. So, I mean, and that's a big thing for any show. It keeps coming back to that. If you have people in the area that's interested and is willing to help, take anything, to bring them to the show and get them involved as much as you can. So the volunteer support has been great, but we can definitely use more if you want to. Greg, so you're signed up. You'll be there to put some exhibits up. We'll see you there.
All right. Well, that said, Susanna, I've had some questions about the Holocaust Stamp Project exhibit that we have here. We've got something coming up, but would you share some of that information with our folks watching?
Yes, just for everyone who's not aware, we have finished a museum exhibit at the American Philatelic Center. It is called A Philatelic Memorial of the Holocaust. Now, this museum exhibit combines 11 million stamps, and those were 11 million stamps that were collected by K through 12 students at a school in Massachusetts, a charter school. Their project at that time, the Holocaust Stamps Project, was to collect a stamp for all of the victims of the Nazi regime. So they collected those stamps, they donated them to us, and we made that into a permanent exhibit here. We, our exhibit committee also put together other sections of the exhibit that included postal history material that came to and from the ghettos and concentration camps in Western Europe. Our team did a lot of research about the events of the Holocaust and between 1933 and 1945. And yeah, it's now open. If you come to the American Philatelic Center, you can tour it. We are having next week, next Wednesday, a dedication ceremony, which we'll be recording and recording for people to watch later. And then on June 11th, that's Sunday, we are having a public open house opening of the exhibit as well, and that's open to everyone. So if you are watching this from nearby, or you're a member watching this and you feel like traveling up in a few weeks, please come and visit. It's going to be a moving experience. Did I miss anything?
No, just a note though, it's a permanent exhibit. So for those of you who aren't able to participate in one of the events that's coming up in the next month, know that it's here and it's a part of the space utilization now for us in the Match Factory. When we built the new library, one of our goals was to use that old library space as a exhibit space to be able to, one, to educate and connect the local community to philately, because that's something that, we've been a fabric of Center County since 1946. And so that's something that's incredibly important to us. But this was just a great project to start with. And Susanna's really led the way on getting this project to completion. And she and Dr. Kathy Brockbill were really the brains of most of the heavy lifting, the coordination and things like that. Fred Fox, who will get a shout out, who's our superintendent, came up with something that no one else could figure out. And that is, how do you display 11 million stamps as part of an exhibit and make it meaningful? And I don't want to give away the surprise yet, but when you see the dedication, you'll realize that it's very powerful what the concept was. And I think it really does make the exhibit come to life. It's the first step for us. We're already working on our second exhibit, and that is centered around the Bellefonte Airmail, which we have most of the supporting material from a book that we sell, written by Kitty Wonderly. It's a wonderful book. Bellefonte was a landing strip for the airmail back in the early days. And we have worked on acquiring some physical items, some ephemera, if you will, parts of planes that crashed to go along with that. So that's going to be an exciting thing for us to talk about. The American Airmail Society held Aerophilately here last year as part of their thanks to us. They contributed the first $5,000 for us to get that exhibit started. It's something I'll be talking about with our membership soon as I work on a number of different fundraising quests. All right. And on that note, we're over time. We have far more questions than I possibly imagined we'd get for this. There is one last question that I want to touch on, and that is regarding ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, which has been getting a lot of attention lately, and how does that apply to a philately? Now I know most folks here aren't necessarily experts on AI, but in your experience, do you see potential for it? And what do you think it could do for the hobby? And or have you had experiences with people using it in different functionality today? Not everybody at once now. So I will say this, which is I do think it has a lot of potential. Right now, I think our number one priority is really to get familiar with AI and educate it, right? So not now that we not only have to educate people about stamp collecting, but we have to educate the computers as well. Part of it is really sort of understanding how they acquire information and how it puts the information out there. You know, if you go and make certain requests of AI, if you make very simple requests, you'll get very simple answers that aren't necessarily good information. And so our challenge, I think, is to work on that and make sure that we understand what sort of things it can be doing, and then ultimately be educators on that. I think there's going to be a lot of discussion about that over the years ahead. We've already reached the we should regulate AI part of the conversation, and I think that's going to be even, that's going to be even more important as we go on. You know, I don't think necessarily that regulation is going to be the first thing we should think about, but there are ethics that we should consider in terms of what it can do. It for all of the help it could give to the hobby, it also has some risks inherent to it as well. So I think we've got to spend some time working on that. I've actually worked with someone who is who's an expert in the neurosciences who wants to write a series of articles on artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, those sorts of things for our website. So be on the lookout for that. I will expect those to be coming probably in the weeks and months ahead. All right. I think with that, we can, I'm going to apologize for all of you who asked questions that did not get them answered. We're going to continue to work on ways to respond to these and get them out to you. I think it will be fun for us to maybe do some Q&A video style so people can make answers and then we can post them on social, share them in our newsletter, those sorts of things. Given the response that we've seen here, I really do think it's probably also a good idea that we start thinking about when would we schedule another one of these, perhaps in the fall after we've all caught up from the Great American Stamp Show and before we have UN Expo here in October. So with that, I want to just say thank you to the directors themselves. It's really a pleasure to have such a great team work with you on a daily basis. And I often say when things go right here, they're there to credit. When things go wrong, I usually get the blame, and I think they enjoy it that way as well. But and for everyone who joined us tonight, for all the folks who asked very good questions, added to the chat functionality with some great input. We have recorded all of this information. If you haven't watched all of the presentation, we'll be posting it online, and we'll also be sharing it for anybody who registered for the event. But with that, unless anyone has anything that they want to put a plug in for or a pitch for that we didn't touch on tonight, I want to say thank you to everyone for joining us.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
everyone.
everyone.
Yes, thank you.